Guys, thank you again for taking the time to talk with us. I got to tell you, I honestly don't remember when I have been this eager to back a Kickstarter campaign. And I got to tell you, Steve, a lot of that has to do with this awesome video. I mean, Kickstarter videos, half the time I just know I'm going to back the campaign without actually even watching the video. But
Right.
But the video came up in my feed and it was like I was hooked like instantly. And what was so great about it is just your enthusiasm for this project just kind of screamed through the screen. And I think it was pretty infectious. And because now for Chris and I, like all of our friends are talking about this project and we were really stoked about it. And so I just wanted to ask you though, for those who haven't seen the Kickstarter video, like take us back to the beginning, like where this all began and that night, like 2 years ago at Jack White's club.
Yes. Well, I've known Russ for a long time. Back when, we were both touring and we did some shows together and we're friends. I actually stayed at Russ and Tori's house in Nashville while I was recording the I Predict album, and they were out of town. So I've gone through his drawers and no, but so we had a long friendship and we'd stayed more or less in touch over the years, but I hadn't seen him in a few years. I think we had gotten a coffee I don't remember how long ago. Russ, probably longer than I think. But when it came time to do our band Chagall Guevara did a reunion show at the Ryman, and for people who paid an inordinate amount of money for the good seats, we felt we needed to do something extra. So we had an after party the next night at Jack White's club in downtown Nashville, the Blue Room, and we told the people that were going to be coming that we'd have some kind of a jam session and invite some special guests. And we invited Russ because, not only do I know him, but Lynn in the band had produced, one of his finest albums, his self-titled album, and Dave Perkins had written one of the songs on that album. And so it just made sense to have Russ come. And to my discredit, I had just assumed that Russ's, prime singing days were probably behind him. And it turned out I was very wrong. Russ did a version of Charlie Peacock's Down in the Lowlands from that same self-titled album that just burned the house down. And it was like a 7-8 minute long performance. Jimmy Abegg, who was in Charlie Peacock's band, I think he just told Russ to go, I don't know, full Pentecostal preacher, right? And
we were there, and I wasn't going to do it because Charlie and I were supposed to do it together,
right?
And so I was just going to stay and enjoy the music and backstage with you guys, and but Jimmy said, "Well, let's do it, and we'll just do it more blues." And of course, when you've been doing this as long as I have, if you fall on your face, it doesn't matter, So anyway, I don't know if we rehearsed it or not, but
I don't think so.
I can't remember rehearsing, but of course with that band, my gosh, that band was just so incredible. And so they were throwing solos back and forth. And I was just standing up there and kind of moving around and then throwing a solo here and throwing a solo there. And Jimmy Abegg said, "Russ, do something." I said, "What?" He goes, "Get out there and do something." I said, "Okay." And I got out there and just started, and I kind of started singing a little bit and then turning into a Pentecostal preacher singing. And it was just one of those things you can't duplicate. But I don't know. I'd never done anything like that before. But it was just incredible. Just incredible.
blew us all away. And afterwards, the band that backed him up was Jimmy Abegg and Peter Furler on drums, and John Mark Painter off on the Perfect Foil. And then we had Lynn Nichols and Dave Perkins from Chagall Guevara. And we were all kind of of the same mind, like, whatever Russ just did there, he needs to do an album like that. And so another friend of ours who was there agreed, and he decided to put up funds to have Russ record an album that would, the idea was to channel that same kind of energy and interest that Rick Rubin brought out of Johnny Cash in the American recordings. And you know, one thing, I know all the guys would have loved to be involved in the project. I just also know from experience that when you get that many people in a room, things take 5 minutes as long as they do otherwise. So John Painter especially had a very specific idea of what he thought Russ needed to do, because John had gone to the same church as Russ for many years. And so he would hear Russ sing in church on Sunday. And he was a fan going back to when he was like a 14-year-old. So he had belonged to Russ's records. And so Russ and John and I got together and started talking about what songs would be interesting, and came up with I think a really interesting mix of cover songs, everything from Prince to U2 to Depeche Mode to Duran Duran to Dylan to Grandma's Hands. Who wrote Grandma's Hands, Russ?
Bill Withers.
Right. And just came up. And then I had another friend who suggested a worship song, All the Poor and Powerless, and another friend of ours who had written a song, Andy Gullahorn, called I Will, which we all love. And just started working on it. And I was the executive producer, which I'm not sure what it means, but it means that I drop in every once in a while and see how things are going. And but John and Russ really worked together over a long period of time, and just recorded Russ in a way that we haven't heard him before, which is really up close in the mic and really present. And I love this. It's easy for me to communicate enthusiasm because I love this album so much. I don't know if I've ever been this excited about a project, and I just want everyone to hear it. So that's why I started a Kickstarter. I don't know if I don't think Russ would have done one on his own, but I said, let me run with this. And a lot of the reason for the Kickstarter, even though the record is done, is I want to put together a team to take the project to a broader audience. You know, we hope all of Russ's gospel fans will get it and enjoy it, which I think they will, but I think it's an album that a lot bigger audience needs to hear. And so that's why we're doing it.
Well, first off, thank you for you answer. I don't know if you noticed, but Chris and I, our eyes lit up when you said I will, because right before we got on with you, we were having a debate on whether or not the I will that we saw listed was the Beatles or Radiohead.
Oh.
And it turns out it's Andy Gullahorn, who I think we both love. Andy Gullahorn's like tremendous. So
let me say this, let me interject. So Steve, you kind of had me at American Recordings Johnny Cash. And what I'm interested in, Russ, related to that is I was revisiting some of your albums. Actually, can I show you one? Can I show you one of your albums?
Sure.
Here? Remember this one?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. See this on the back?
Yeah, our Saturday Night Live Fever outfits.
Yeah, I showed
John
my
Travolta.
Exactly. That's funny, John Travolta. I showed my 15-year-old son this, and he's like, "That's the most 70s thing I've ever seen." That's what he said today. And he said, but then there's this. This is a cool photo too. This iconic photo right here on the Metals album and stuff. So
right.
In revisiting your music over the past week or so, you don't really have a genre. You go wherever. Like your voice just fills that space. What I'm curious about, what is your thoughts? Like, have you ever had an album like this before, recorded in this way? Is there something about, am I getting the kind of Americana bluesy vibe here that maybe we haven't heard before? What can you say about that?
Well, you know, John and Steve both know my voice. And let me just back up about this, him downplaying this executive producer role. He would come in periodically. We had long meetings before we went in, and but Steve was just kind of on top there looking, and he would make comments here, make comments there, and then John and I would take it and put the nuts and bolts together to make this record. But let me just say this too: Steve Taylor, in all my years in Nashville, and there's been a lot of them, is the most creative person I've ever met. Of just the way that he viewed things, the way that his mind works, and he's always outside the box. I don't think he's ever been in the box, but with the way he approaches stuff, and just the analytical part of who he is and what he is, to think like a chess match, like three moves ahead of where everybody else is going. And he just, this is my first time to actually work with him, and I am just set in amazement at his talent and what he does and how he does. And he's got 14 irons in the fire, and he's just constantly moving and creating. And I got to see last, was it Tuesday? No, last Friday,
Right.
whenever it was, Friday. Steve be the musical director, the professor, influencing hundreds of young musicians, singers at Lipscomb University. And I got to see him in that role of this mentor that's teaching all these young people their craft. And I was just thinking how fortunate these students are to have someone like him, you know, of just, because he sees the best in things. He can look at a situation, like he heard my voice and he saw what it was. But with this record, he and John, you know, I've been known for just screaming, you know, most of my career. I've just been, you know, screaming. But with this record, they began to experiment on the lower part of my voice, which has not been used hardly at all through my career. And with the way it was produced, and, you know, the mic is so flat and in your face, that it took me a while to get comfortable with that, because you know, there are certain, over the years, I like certain mics, preamps, and but they didn't want that. And I was like, okay, you know, I like all this stuff, and it was like raw. And a lot of the stuff singing I was doing, the tracks were like, you know, John playing piano and a drum, you know, drums, and maybe a bass, whatever, but it was just bare and sparse. Now I'm used to, you know, over the years, I like everything in the headphones, you know, but this was just empty. And so it really, I wasn't leaning on anything that I could just kind of lean on with the, you know, the band, the tracks, and all of, I mean, the horn player, or whatever, that I've toured with for so long. But it was just me and a microphone, and sometimes with a sheet of paper in my hand, you know, getting comfortable with the lyrics. And I would say, okay, you know, I'm learning. I want to come in tomorrow and do it again. John would go, no, let's leave it alone. Let's leave it alone. He'd play it for Steve. And, and it was a record. I just had to surrender, you know, to just, okay, to do something I've never done before, which is so exciting. You know, a guy that's been doing it as long as I have, and for the way that Steve and John approached this project. And I tell you, you know, there was one time I just had a meltdown. I don't know if I can deliver what they're looking for, because it's way outside my comfort zone. And you know, I was having a really hard day, and Steve promised me. He said, Russ, I won't let you embarrass yourself, because I was so outside of my comfort zone, the way I've been making records for all of these years. But I don't know, I just laid back and trusted, and, you know, reached way down deep and sang. But these song selections are just so, I don't know, they moved me. There were times with some of these songs in the studio, I would just have to stop singing and tears rolling down my face. And I don't know. It just, something happened on the inside of me doing this record that it just made me appreciate what was going on around me, and trusting these guys and letting them direct me. And John is a great vocal producer. You know, vocal producers, they know when to step in and kind of maneuver you this way, and they know when to stay out of it. And John was that way. And so he got some great vocals out of me. He just let me be me. And if there was little tweaks here, little tweaks there, but something happens when you trust. And I'd never worked with them in the studio before. And in that studio, it gets real intimate. It's just you and music and another guy. And I don't like anybody to look at me while I'm singing. All the years I've been singing, I always have some kind of buffer between me and the control room. And so just to be able to feel these songs and sing these songs, and to feel them well up inside of me, to sing a type of lyric I've never sang before, but it's powerful. The message is powerful. And every song at the bands that Steve mentioned, these lyrics will move you. I mean, I was singing this stuff and going, my God, that's the truth. My God, that's real. That, you know, I would love to say that from a secular point of view, that everybody could understand, not just Christians. You know what I mean? I'm kind of rambling on here, but it's been such an honor to work with Steve. It really has been.
Yeah, Steve, anything you would want to say in terms of like how we're going to hear a different side of Russ?
Yeah, he managed to bring something else to some of these songs. And no disrespect to the original artist, but in some ways he made these songs his own. And I think in more than one situation, like made the definitive version. I think of a song like Demons by one of my favorite bands, The National. And I love that song, and I love the way they do it, and they do it in 7/4. But Russ turned it into a soul song, a song by Prince called The Cross. The way Russ's voice takes that song over, and the way John produced it with Scott Mulvihill on a stand-up bass, and just a really slow build, turns it into something epic and yet absolutely personal at the same time. I love U2's When Love Comes to Town. You know, it's U2 and B.B. King. Russ just did something else with it in a really interesting and beautiful way. I Believe in You, the Bob Dylan song from the 70s. He did the same thing with that. Oh man! And then there's a song that we don't actually know who the author is. It's in the public domain. It's Tear This Building Down. It's also known as Samson and Delilah, or If I Had My Way. And that's the song that leads off the album.
Samson and the lion got in a attack. Samson jumped on that lion's back. You read about the lion, he killed a man with his paw. Samson got his hands around the lion's jaw. He ripped that beast till the lion was dead, and the bees made honey in the lion's head. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I would tear this building down, tear this building down.
And I feel like Russ's version is the one the only version I'd ever want to hear, even though it's been covered by Springsteen and Bob Dylan and the Grateful Dead and Peter, Paul and Mary. I just think Russ made the version that is going to stick. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm a pretty big enthusiast when it comes to this album.
Russ, one of the things that I thought that was interesting that you just said and was a little surprising to me was when you were kind of talking about the hesitancy to sing in front of other people, because seeing you in front of an audience, like you really seem to be energized by other people. Is there something about the intimacy of being in a studio where it's just a couple guys that makes it harder for you? Because I just don't see that when you're on stage.
It's two different things completely. You know, when I'm in front of an audience, I'm a performer. You know, I know how to move an audience, but when you are just trying to create something in the studio, and my mother told me when I was a kid, you know, working with me about singing, she said, "Son, when you sing, reach way down deep because that's where the anointing is." And I've always been that way. I don't. If somebody sees me in the control room and I'm singing and they're watching, I perform. You know, I know somebody's watching me, but if I'm cocooned and I can just close my eyes and go to that place that that's just real and creative and honest, it's a whole different animal to allow that to happen inside of you. It's just so much different than standing in front of an audience, but there alone, nobody's seeing you, and so much of the times my eyes are closed, and I'm just in my world, and when I'm like that, I can create so much better, and come up with new stuff, different stuff, for me when I'm alone in that vocal booth.
Looking at the Kickstarter, I can't remember what it was. It was sometime last week. You released a snippet of the song "Tear That Building Down," "Tear This Building Down." Well, where do we go? You're kind of in the second half, I believe, maybe, or you're getting there of the Kickstarter. What can us fans look forward to? I know we often talk about, you know, the rewards after the top, but right now you need to meet the goal. So I don't know, any insights you want to share?
No, it's off to a really good start, and I'm confident we'll make it. There's a lot of vinyl involved, just because part of the thrill of this album is just the sonics of it. Is just hearing Russ's voice and hearing the tracks that John built with some really fine musicians. And then we had a longtime friend, Matt Wallace, who was a ace producer and mix engineer, everything from Faith No More and The Replacements and the first, and in my mind, the only good Maroon 5 album he produced. And then he has also gotten involved in Dolby Atmos mixes. And if you've ever sat in a Dolby Atmos room and heard a Dolby Atmos mix, it's like a whole different listening experience. So he and his partner in Dolby Atmos, Will Kennedy, mixed the album in Dolby Atmos as well. And Russ got a chance to hear it in their studio at Sound City in Los Angeles, and it was an experience like no other. I think, right, Russ? I mean,
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
yeah.
I don't know what word to use. I want to say blown away, but it was more than that. I was just I was overwhelmed with sounds from the record that I hadn't heard, because, you know, when you listen through little speakers, all that John did and the intricacies, well, you know what I'm saying, of it, but when it was on those speakers, you hear every little cymbal sound, you know, bell sound, whatever. And I was amazed. It was amazed. It like take this, you know, this, and it makes it just something like that. I mean, it was a spiritual experience for me, because the music, it went to a whole different level than I'd ever heard it. But yeah, Steve.
You get a little bit of the sense with headphones, but there's nothing like being in an actual Dolby Atmos.
Oh my.
And so what we're going to do is, with one of the things in the Kickstarter is we're throwing a listening party in a Dolby Atmos room for people who want to sign up at that level, and it's going to be a blast. It's going to be in Nashville, probably sometime in October, And I just can't wait for people to hear it. They've started doing listening parties like this for big albums. Pearl Jam did one in Los Angeles a while back. But part of the fun is you're listening to an album in a way that you've never heard it before when you listen to it on a Dolby Atmos setup. And it's the room we're looking at has 60 discrete speakers distributed.
Oh my gosh.
The walls and the ceiling of the theater was built
Oh.
especially to be a Dolby Atmos room. So that's one of the things we're looking forward to, and it'll be a fun time. And we'll have some, guests there as well, and some of the people that played on the album, and it should be a party.
I've never heard sound that good from anywhere. I've never heard sound that good to where you hear every little thing on a record and it feels like it's a mile wide.
Right.
I mean, my little speakers at home, but with those speakers, I mean, it was like an ocean. It was like, my gosh.
Matt played us. He played us a couple of mixes that he had done in Dolby Atmos recently. He did Foreigner's Urgent, which I love that song from when I was a kid, and hearing it in Dolby Atmos, it was like a whole different experience. What else did he do? B-52's song Rome, and he played that for us, and it just like came to life like in a whole different way. So to have him mix the album and then do it in Dolby Atmos, and I got to say, Matt didn't know anything about Russ Taff. And I've never heard him this excited about a project. He just started calling me randomly saying, "Who is this guy? And why have I never heard of him before?" And he flipped out over Russ's version of People Are People by the Depeche Mode and started sending it to other people unsolicited, just like friends of his in the industry. You got to hear this guy, and you got to hear this track. So that was a nice confirmation early on that we were onto something.
To have a guy at that caliber that has been in the front of music, to say he liked what I did, I almost cried. It was like that guy, because that guy knows what he's talking about, and he thinks I'm pretty good.
Yes, he does.
So we're different colors and we're different creeds. And different people have different needs. It's obvious you hate me, though I've done nothing wrong. I've never even met you, so what could I have done? I can't understand what makes a man hate another man. Help me understand. People are people, so why should it be? You and I should get along so awfully. People are people, so why should it be? You and I should get along so awfully.
So you've sold us. When do we get to hear this thing? Because I mean, we're just excited.
On the Kickstarter campaign, we're actually allowing everybody who signs up to get a download of the album before it's released to the public, and so that they can hear it first. And I just can't wait for people to hear the whole album. It's pretty extraordinary.